Hello, viewers. Happy to meet you all again in this conversation talk series in conversation with guest speaker today. I'm extremely happy and it's a proud privilege to have Mr. Varadarajan Kannan, also fondly called in USA Victor Kannan. Thank you, Mr. Varadarajan Kannan, for joining us in this conversation series.
It's a pleasure to be here with you, Anand. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So before I start the conversation with you, I thought I'll take a few minutes to introduce your profile to our viewers. Mr. Varadarajan Kannan, Mr. Victor Kannan, is a lifelong financial executive and a director of Heartfulness Institute Inc., USA, an international non-profit organization with operating presence of heartfulness meditation in over 150 countries. Having graduated with high honors, he started his management career in banking at the age of 21 and moved to USA in 1983. He has been a CFO in the high-tech space since the late 80s at US. He lives in Atlanta, Georgia, with his wife and his daughter, who's in California. As an independent thinker, he writes frequently for various magazines, including Heartfulness and blog sites in multiples. His favorite topics are self-development, spirituality, and meditation. Thank you very much, Mr. Kannan. Though I always read your profile in various forums in multiple pages, but you are so conscious to share only few thoughts for this conversation because you want to share more to our viewers. I really appreciate that. So in this conversation, I like to have kind of four segments. The first segment is about your personal journey back in India in the 70s, 80s. Would you be able to share something about your childhood memories and your school days and your college days back in India in Chennai to start with?
Yes. I used to say that we all grew up like blades of grass, meaning the sunshine and the nice pure air and the conducive environment, but we kind of grew up naturally. And I was born into a large family, and I am the youngest, the last of the six. And of course, my grandparents, they all came from a very humble beginning. My father, being the only son of my paternal grandfather, right? He went to school. He used to, I think I was told that he used to go by bullock cart for a while, and then he bought a cycle.
Okay.
And then he matriculated like 11th grade in India those days. And then he started out as a clerk in, I think, collector's office in that district. And then eventually he became a collector himself. He became an IAS officer. And that was like maybe 40, 50 years of service. He was a very honest man, and I can say that most of our inspiration comes from him, from how to deal with the outside world.
Okay.
And of course, my mother, she passed away about 5 months ago today. She was the eldest of her family, and she had probably about a dozen siblings.
Oh.
And so there are some uncles that are younger than my brothers. That's how large and natural the family has been. So we grew up, or I grew up in that type of a carefree environment. We didn't know what we didn't have. And also, my father being a government officer, he always had a few people. But since he was an honest man, we didn't have much to stretch towards the end of the month. We had to wait for the salary to come in. but my mother always treated everybody equally, including some of the people that served my father.
Mhm.
Many times we used to sit together and eat, and we didn't experience any caste system in our family, even though we were Brahmins, or we were from that tradition. So I think those things deeply impacted me, both from my father's side and my mother's side, to put humans first and then forget about all other identities. And then, of course, when I was 17, like every other teenager, you start wondering about things around you and try to make sense out of things that are told or practiced. So I had a little bit of a rational revolt against religion when I was 17, and but that helped me enormously in terms of exploring the yogic science, which comes under the field of spirituality. So I was able to easily understand the difference between religion and spirituality, and also how integrated an approach it is to be part of a spiritual search. And so that's more or less my background. And of course, I wanted to make sure that I studied well and broke out of that situation that we were in, which was a little bit of a, um, I would say, economic struggle. A large family, not much of traditional rich assets to go by. And so all of us had to chart our own course.
Absolutely.
So that's how it started. And I became a probationary officer with State Bank of India, and they transferred me to Los Angeles, and I came, and that's how it went along.
Phenomenal. The kind of points which I just captured in your first part of our discussion. One of the fascinating thing which I really felt very happy, and I hope all the viewers who are watching this would who could resonate it, which is a joint family, a mega joint family which you have. And
Yeah.
I guess you are still in touch with everybody back home, back at Chennai and India. And I hope many people who have traveled even outside and settled in many places of the country, the world, across the globe. So it's fantastic to know about your family and your studies and your very candid, expressions about the humble background. That shows the value system. So I'm very happy, sir. So from India to all the way to USA. So in early 80s, I guess you have settled down in the, I think, private organization. I think you moved from banking, State Bank of India, to, I guess, the high-tech space, the technology space. So I'd like to hear more on the professional journey in US.
Sure. We moved to Atlanta in mid 80s, and having gotten the exposure to finance and also worked with a lot of private organizations as part of a banker, I was able to move to the other side of the table, so to speak, the customer side, right, from the banking side. So I got into this relatively new, small, high-tech company. And of course, in the mid 80s to late 80s, that's when the PCs were beginning to grow, the PC-based architecture and PC-based companies.
Correct.
So I started with a company here and stayed with them for about 14 years.
Mhm.
And I was part of the growth of that company from 11 million to 250 million plus.
Okay.
And we grew from maybe 30, 40 employees to 800 employees, and one organization to 10 organizations or 10 subsidiaries
Mhm.
in many countries.
Mhm.
So that was a great experience. Um, and I grew in that job, both in the career and as a person. And we developed quite a few business relationships,
Mhm.
and that kind of helped me, beyond that.
Mhm.
I always try to put people and their progress first, and that helped. I didn't know that at that time, but now I can tell you that's a formula for improving productivity.
Mhm.
Um, if you are able to nurture the people that work with you,
Yes,
they stay with you,
true.
and that increases productivity more than any other formula you can think of.
Mhm.
They know their moves, they know their decisions, they know how to reach you, and if you're open,
Mhm.
without much of a big fanfare,
Okay.
uh, things flow.
Mhm.
And we all now know how flow is important
That's
for productivity.
true.
And so I think I grew, they grew both financially as well as professionals.
Mhm.
And so it was a big. I mean, I've not lost a lot of people in my leadership career.
Mhm. Mhm.
Of course, quote unquote, I clean house, but that can be done very quickly when you go into a new organization. The way in which I have approached is fix the policies first and the processes next, and then make sure that everybody gets trained. And then, if people that are not compatible, you basically tell them that they'll be better off elsewhere. And they do perform better elsewhere, because if they are not fit in your organization, that doesn't mean they're not fit for other organization.
True.
So there comes a point the team becomes important.
Mhm.
So um, I have not held many jobs, but the few jobs that I've held, they have gone for long.
Mhm.
And the best way to approach those things is to um, take care of the first things first, like Stephen Covey says,
Yes.
policies, processes, procedures, and training.
Mhm.
And then if the person doesn't fit,
Mhm.
they are happy to leave at that point in time
True.
and find a better spot somewhere else. And then the team carries on after that.
Mhm.
And if you are part of a growing company, everybody grows with it.
True. It's about 35 years of your journey, if I calculate from 19 mid 80s till today. I have few questions which is going to be of some benefit to the leaders back in India as well as all over the world. People are watching this. With respect to leadership, see, you have touched upon a couple of points, like typically like what the HR team does typically when they recruit people. So they have to look after the staff welfare, as we call. So the employee welfare, and
Yes.
looking after the processes and looking after their goal sheets aligned with their personal goals, so that they can also resonate the vision of the organization and things like that. So one of the things which I, in the consulting space, since I'm there for some time, I found that the DNA of the organization, the culture of the organization, makes all the difference for people to be with them. So how do you look at the DNA culture, which is there in US, and what is the difference between US kind of culture and Indian corporates with respect to your understanding?
Right. This idea of corporate culture is very significant. That probably 20, 25 years ago, I read an article published by IBM, and they were arguing that a good corporate culture is the only competitive advantage that you can have long term.
Mhm.
Because that's the only thing that cannot be easily copied. Everything else they can copy. It's just a matter of time before they can reverse engineer your product
True,
and come up with a better product.
true.
So if you want to have a high value corporation or organization, corporate culture is important. And to me, corporate culture is always top down.
Okay.
It is not. It is not in just the vision, mission, value statement, but also how those vision, mission, and value statements emanated out of the founder's heart.
Okay.
And then they have to make sure that they resonate throughout the organization as a living being So corporate cultures are actually tangible in terms of their expression, but very intangible in terms of their recipe.
Mhm.
We all talk about mother's cooking, and there are some secret sauces, right?
Yeah.
So I think the corporate culture should have the secret sauce of the passion and the inspiration of the founders
Mhm.
that get expressed through various artifacts in the organization.
Mhm.
So coming to your question of what is different in the US and in India, I mean, that is a little bit of a larger aggregate, right? But if you are talking about a corporate culture, it is specific to individual corporations.
Yes.
And within the individual corporation, you can even go to a department, right?
Yes.
Like I have been heading finance department, of course, as a CFO.
Mhm.
It is a lot more than accounting. It is more than strategic. It is strategic. It is more operational. There
Yes.
is a lot of intersections with respect to other aspects, other departments of your organization. So even if you have a culture in your department,
Mhm.
that can spread out and touch others.
Okay.
So there is a country culture as a business friendly country. Then you have a corporate culture,
Mhm.
and then you have a department culture.
Okay.
Uh, and so, speaking of the cultural difference between US and India, US is lot more entrepreneurial
Yes.
in its culture. So it basically rewards individual performance,
Okay.
and of course, um, those individuals that make a distinction, they get highlighted and promoted. And also, um, the corporate fabric
Mhm.
in the US is pretty much spread out. If you take the big conglomerates versus medium-sized companies to small companies, there is quite a bit of spread
Correct.
in terms of the number of organizations in each one of the strata.
Mhm.
But in India, I'm not sure. I don't have the visibility in India. You either have big multinationals or small companies. I'm not sure if the small, medium, large, and mega large, they're all kind of spread out evenly. So the entrepreneurial culture
Mhm.
that we have in the US
Mhm.
versus a lot more hierarchical culture in India.
Mhm.
That's the only distinction that is obvious to me.
Mhm.
And so, how does it lend itself for efficiency, for um, innovation, right?
Mhm.
And for competitiveness.
Mhm. Here I have a question where I'd like to understand more deeper into this. In India, if you really look at in terms of corporations, enterprises, as we call, and the micro, small, medium enterprises, MSMEs, as we call, as you rightly said, there are two extremes. And either people are there at that level where the enterprise organizations with a multinational culture, which is also there in the Indian corporates. Of course, most of them are family-owned businesses. If you take Reliance or Birla Group, all are family-owned. They say 85% of the companies, large companies, are owned by families. And there is a void. There is a huge void where more than 63 million companies are in India who are MSMEs. And out of which I would say about 80 to 85% are small companies, what we call micro companies, small business owners. So the question here is, how do we bring, though all are entrepreneurs, 6.3 crore entrepreneurs are there, and employed about 110 million people who are working in MSMEs. But the drive as an entrepreneur, the true drive as an entrepreneur is really missing for several people. In my own experience, I could see. So how do we bring that dynamics to empower these people to become more entrepreneurial in their action, not just for the constitution.
Yes, yes. I mean, if you look at the DNA of an entrepreneur, uh, the entrepreneur is not money oriented. Entrepreneur goes after a passion, right?
Yes.
Money is a side effect
Byproduct.
or it is byproduct. But when people want to have a shortcut for success,
Mhm.
I am afraid that they are going to compromise on the process of excellence.
Okay.
The second issue is the lifestyle businesses.
Okay.
When you said that India has got family-owned businesses as 85% of the total businesses, the family-owned businesses are all hand-me-downs, right? And so what is the guarantee that the second generation is as passionate and entrepreneurial as the first generation? So if you are doing business for survival, or if you are doing business as a lifestyle, obviously it's not going to be an organization that pursues excellence.
Mhm.
A true entrepreneur is not happy or satisfied with success as much as growth.
Mhm.
So an entrepreneur wants to continue to grow. He's entrepreneurial,
Yes.
meaning once he reaches a level of success, he's looking for something else, looking for something else, looking for something else.
A goalpost is
The DNA,
yeah.
the DNA of an entrepreneur is drive, but the DNA of a family-owned business and a lifestyle businesses are basically maintaining their destinations.
Okay.
So if you are maintaining your destination, you are making tweaks to be there.
Okay.
You are not taking risk to go to what is next.
Okay.
So the so-called family businesses are no longer entrepreneurial in their structure,
Mhm.
but more to maintain their status.
Okay. But you mean to say that bringing professionals into the entity, into the organizations, makes the organization survive and sustain for over the period of long years? That's what you try to communicate.
No, when you are again where you are in the strata, right? Now I am addressing these the 85% of the family businesses that are there, but the MSMEs that you are talking about.
Yes.
How are they going to get out of that MSME status to a bigger corporation, right?
Absolutely.
If they are truly entrepreneurial, right, they will take risk in terms of expanding their management. They will trust the management. They will bring on professionals. Then they will continue to innovate
Mhm.
and then keep on adding more and adding more.
Mhm.
And if you take those kinds of companies, we probably have a very few companies like Tata's and Birla's and maybe Arvind's, right?
Yeah.
Because they have now reached maybe second generation, third generation, fourth generation of family members,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And they have also woven in professionals from the very beginning.
Very true.
And so it's a combination of family plus professionals putting together it, it's a different type of an organizational DNA.
Correct.
But in the US,
Mhm.
even small companies are, entrepreneurial, whereby they are constantly trying to break out.
Mhm.
If you have a restaurant, for example, that becomes a family lifestyle business. And even there, people are looking for branching out into franchise.
Okay.
So if you look at US, uh, it's probably one of the most upward mobile countries, where within one generation, you will see enough examples of people that were able to break the ceilings and move up.
Mhm. Mhm.
And there are many, many examples like that. So I'm just driving home the point of a simple distinction
Mhm.
that there are more entrepreneurial um, fibers in
Mhm.
the culture of corporations, small or big,
Mhm.
compared to hierarchical
Okay.
in India.
Okay. Okay. That makes quite a lot of difference.
Because the difference is here is the speed of innovation.
True. True. I have one question before I move on to the next segment of our discussions about society, where you are
Yeah.
passionately contributing a lot. So I'll come to that a little later. So the one question here is on the entrepreneurial ventures here, the MSMEs, because I represent MSMEs in many forums. I could see that most of the people are technopreneurs rather than entrepreneurs. They had a brilliant idea and product or service. They ventured into business, but all the time they themselves work 24 by 7. And so they don't focus more on the leadership aspects of building the organization to the next level. Rather, they focus more on to the uh, technocrats, typically people. So they focus more on technical aspects of the business. So this is where I think they have to break the chain and then move to the next scale. So what kind of suggestion or input from your experience with the US market, especially the small business owners, whatever you observed and witnessed? Since you worked in high-tech space, I don't know whether you have dealt with micro, small, medium enterprises in US. Would you be able to share some three takeaways, key aspects where how do I break technopreneurship to entrepreneurship? How do I move?
I mean, it's just a matter of taking more risk. That's all. I mean, if somebody went to, um, a big tech school, right? And then they had an idea and they became a technopreneur, right? At that point in time. But that is like they were trying to solve one problem and then that solution became a company
Yes.
and that's it. Again, it is one of those serendipity. So
Yeah.
if the technopreneur wants to continue to build organizations,
Mm.
they have no choice but to bring on more professionals to help them in administration, in management, in human resources, in talent management, in IT, infrastructure, security, all of the above.
Mhm.
And so you have no choice because you don't have the expertise.
True.
You only recognized a single problem and created a solution, and then that became your company.
Correct.
But the world is changing every day.
Yes.
So there is a need for the technopreneur to continue to increase the product line, increase the solution set. That means he needs more and more people that he can trust, he can delegate. He doesn't have to worry about taking care of administration, scaling up, distribution, production, manufacturing, vendor relationships, talent management, and so forth. So a technopreneur who is not able to trust at least the next three exos, right? A CFO or a COO or a CTO or a CIO or a CMO or a combination of some of those people, it's very hard. You just simply can't grow. There is no enough bandwidth in a single individual
Mhm.
to grow the companies.
Mhm.
And so if they are not able to find those people, they need to at least find a consultant who will come in on a temporary basis
Mhm.
to resolve the issues for them and then install a management that can kind of go further. So these consultants like yourself, you have relationships. You have a longer, deeper relationships that are credible. So you can even help this technopreneur through the consulting service, not only to solve the process issues or the marketing issues, but also to install people that can be leaders in their organizations.
Absolutely.
So the technopreneurs must recognize that, especially in the US, there is nothing called staying static. You are either growing or you are dying.
Okay.
You are not, there is no mid path.
Okay.
If you fail to grow, that means you are dying.
Okay.
Grow or perish.
I mean, staying safe is actually nothing but moving towards death. Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And I mean, people are afraid of their lifestyles and things like that,
Yeah.
but you can have a better lifestyle by having a broader management that you can trust.
Mm. True. True. I mean, very profound thoughts you have shared, and it resonates very well with our consulting space. We always say you don't actually have to have a CEO for your organization because you can't afford to pay for that high profile, but you can actually have a virtual CEO. You can actually hire CEO for a brief time, say 1 year or so, and he can turn around the organization, and then you can always have your own second level leadership to grow the organization. It's profound. Thank you so much for very detailed insights about the industry, the professional journey. So I'd like to move on to the third segment, which is about society in general. And I know you have been doing quite a lot of activities and a support system, which you are involved in the Heartfulness Institute as a director. So I'd like to hear more with respect to your participation in the societal initiatives, especially when I heard from somebody, I also witnessed the institution back in Gujarat. You have done some wonderful initiatives for college students. So could you please share your experience of the heartfulness practice as well as your involvement?
Right. As I said, when I was 17, I had a rational revolt against religion. Uh, and that kind of kept me thinking about many things in life. And of course, I had put in self development as part of my um, life. We have to develop ourselves all the time. And so in 2010-11, I went to India on sabbatical for about a couple of years. And I had an opportunity, thanks to one of the teachers of this system of meditation. He nudged me into looking into a possibility of creating a course at a university level.
Mm-hmm.
So after 2 weeks of introspection, I wrote a 2-page document. And then I took it and met with the vice chancellor.
Okay.
And he said, these are our dream come true type of a proposal. So
Mm-hmm.
he didn't have any questions. He basically upgraded the whole thing to offering the whole thing to his faculty because this was supposed to be for his students.
Mm-hmm.
He said, no, 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 this is so good. I want my faculty to do this first.
Okay.
And that was very heartening because the proof of the pudding is in the eating of it, right? So he said, okay, before we go to the students, I want my faculty to get on it.
Okay.
So the program was called Self-Development
Okay.
in the context of spirituality and a practical approach.
Okay.
So that was the name of the course.
Mm-hmm.
So self-development,
Mm-hmm.
spirituality,
Mm-hmm.
and a practical approach.
Wonderful. How many students have,
So
how many faculties students have undergone in 2011, 2012?
the first round, I think that campus had probably 200 uh, assistant professors. They didn't interfere with the students' schedule.
Mm-hmm.
So we had that for about, I think, 12 to 15 weeks, if I remember correctly. So I conducted the program. We had some guest speakers, a few of them. We had some international speakers.
Mm-hmm.
And so we gave them a good experience of what is yoga, what is spirituality, what is meditation,
Mm-hmm.
and how does science play a role in all these things, and what religions tried to do and what it ended up as, and how it is all part of a big integrated approach. There are, and so now that has kind of evolved into a larger program in many campuses, and not only in India but also in other places.
I was about to ask this question. So, how the whole journey has now culminated into?
Yes. So it has been taken up in many organizations, because previously so-called meditation was learned in an ashram or in a yoga center.
Mm-hmm.
But now the meditation is part and parcel of your daily life and business life and personal life and social relationships and conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And many things also came along after that. The International Day of Yoga
Okay.
that started 3 years ago.
Yes.
And many campuses have meditation rooms. It's not only airports that have prayer and meditation rooms, but also many campuses, both corporations as well as universities have campuses. And as you know, yoga is now extending itself into meditation. So many of the yoga teachers are offering meditations.
True.
And so if you take meditation for stress management, that's one end of the spectrum. And you can do meditation like our ancient rishis did for self-realization. That is the other end of the spectrum.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's all in the self-improvement category or self-development category.
True.
So I was happy. I'm quite happy to say that I stumbled into, got lucky enough to get the opportunity and experiment,
Mm-hmm.
and it became, I would say, hugely successful
Mm-hmm.
in terms of bringing into mainstream
Mm-hmm.
meditation and connecting it with spirituality, which is nothing more than an inner development.
Okay.
Spirituality in my mind is nothing esoteric or religious, but inner development. So what can we do to understand our inside?
Mm-hmm.
Why do we react the way we react? Why do we respond the way we respond? What are the components that we can understand and manage so that my response is civilized, my response is better, my response is holistic, instead of my reaction being driven by my flight, fight, or freeze mode, right, of response.
True.
So how can we go from a primitive to progressive,
Mm-hmm.
uh, from reactive to responsive,
Mm-hmm.
from me as a selfish human being
Mm-hmm.
to we as connected people?
Mm-hmm.
To me, those are all the inner journey that we can undertake. And so that's what spirituality all about. It's nothing esoteric.
I mean,
So that's
it also gives me a pleasure to share, like kind of expanding the consciousness is what you meant.
yes. I mean, consciousness is again a loosely defined word, even though from the physics perspective,
Mm-hmm.
they are calling it as a hard problem because it's very difficult to define and measure, and it is a problem because of the subjective first person experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then consciousness, like the Vedantic philosophy, is kind of sometimes akin to the soul, which is like a universal idea, while a part of it is reflected in the individual identity, like uh, the water in a mud pot, right, versus the water in the ocean.
Okay.
Uh, you know, so a lot of um, parables and examples and stories to drive home a single point that we human beings are like any other part of creation
Mhm.
is a phenomenal, wonderful object, right?
Absolutely.
And the only thing that we can do is to observe one's own self,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
But unfortunately, our faculties are externally driven, so we always see others. We always look at others, cars and others' homes and others' beauty, but we have very little know-how
Correct.
of how to go back and wonder about our own selves internally,
Mhm.
and then experience that wonder from within, and then extend it. I mean, we are full of wonder ourselves.
Absolutely. So here, I'd like to dive a little deep into this subject because this is your favorite cup of tea. So am I. So here, if you look at the professional life and the self development, so to say. So how do we, either entrepreneur or professionals or students or homemakers, all walks of life, how do we strike a balance in today's world, especially we are all on pandemic times? So the kind of stress, the kind of mood swings happening, the kind of irritability happens every now and then in families, society, everywhere, even within oneself. So how do we really strike a real balance so that the peace is felt all the time? Yet we are progressive in our professional journey.